And today what I'm going to share with you guys is my testimony of my ministry at Unilever. Some of you guys may have heard bits and pieces, but this is kind of like a comprehensive, put together version of everything that's happened. So, again, God has been working in a very mighty way at my company. And and I want to show you guys how ministry is possible in the workplace or at your schools or wherever you come into contact with a lot of people. So for those of you who don't know, I work at Unilever. It's a global company with over 400 brands. We have over 1 billion consumers using our products daily. And chances are you probably have some of your products in our home, right? We own brands like Suave, Dove, Tresemme, Breyers Ice Cream, Hellmann's Mayonnaise, and many, many more. It's among the top 5 consumer goods companies in the world. It's a very progressive company. They advocate, they're all about diversity and inclusion, right? And in my field of packaging engineering, Unilever is among the top companies to work for. But how I even got the job in the first place was an incredible miracle because God opened the doors for me because I know He had a plan for me out on the East Coast. I applied to over around 100 companies and went on numerous interviews, right? And the only company that gave me an offer was Unilever, which is like my top choice. And again, it's not because of anything special about me, right? Because honestly, all the little lame companies, which I'm like, oh, I should totally get a job there. Like, they should obviously give me an offer because, like, they're really not that impressive. I didn't even get offers from those companies. And I was like, oh, wow, like, maybe I'm not that, maybe I'm not qualified. I don't know. But God shut every door, and He opened the door to this company, my dream company, right? And He had a plan for me here. So I just want to rewind a little bit. Back in 2014, right, I had my conversion experience through being part of a canvassing program, and that's actually the way that my brother was converted. And again, I thought canvassing was something that just, homeschool Adventist kids, I thought it was like the top side hustle for the homeschool Adventist kid to make some money on the side. And I'd been through public school my whole life. I was 22 years old when I did it, so I was a little bit older, probably one of the older ones in the program. Still at Michigan State University, which is one of the biggest party schools in the country. So I was coming from a very worldly background, and coming into the canvassing program with a bunch of homeschool Adventist kids is definitely a culture shock. But it was a good culture shock. I think I needed it for sure. So honestly, it's a miracle that both my brother and I are in the church today, and canvassing was a pivotal part of our conversion and one of the most valuable life experiences that I had. So anybody that has kids, I guess it'd just be Eric and Jane, send Matthew to canvassing. Yeah, send him canvassing. So that was very powerful. So I had the background of evangelism, of door-to-door ministry, and then also after that, I was scared of going back into the world, going back into Michigan State University, because I was afraid I was going to fall back to my old ways. So I did a 14-week intensive evangelism school called Emmanuel Institute, and that's where we did door-to-door ministry and Bible studies with people. And now that I graduated, I was in the corporate world, I did not have time for ministry like that. After work, I would get home, I'll cook dinner, I'd eat my dinner, and then I'll clean up dinner, and I have no time, I go to sleep. There really wasn't much to life, no free time outside of work, right? I wanted to do ministry, but I had no time because the majority of my day was lived at my company. I'm a corporate slave, that's what I am. But, don't feel bad if you guys are corporate slaves today or working in companies. God has a place for you there, right? He has a purpose for you there to reach out to all the other people who are also slaves at that company. Now, I'm only half joking because I really like working at the company that I'm at because the people that I work with are pretty awesome. The company itself is pretty cool, so I really have no complaints. But, I was asking God, what can I do to serve Him? And that's when it hit me. My company was my mission field. It is my mission field. Obviously, because that's where I spend most of my time. And up until that point, I had taken the silent witness approach. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? but I realized that I should be actively engaged in ministry at work, right? I shouldn't just kind of hope that people ask me, oh, what makes you so different, Brian? Oh, I'm so glad you asked. Let me tell you about Jesus, you know? Those kind of things, like, it's rarely happened. I don't think it's even ever happened to me once at my company. But, doing ministry at work, this is scary because, you know everyone there, right? And if you happen to talk about Jesus with them and things got kind of weird, well, guess what? I'm probably going to see them tomorrow. And then the day after that. And then the day after that. And the week after that. And I would just be constantly coming into contact with them, and it could be, it's kind of like a high-stakes situation, right? Now, I can briefly get into how God started things at my company. And around August of 2019, there was a workshop at my company called the Purpose Workshop. And it's something that was picking up in popularity at large companies. And the premise is to help employees find their life's purpose. Because purpose is what drives a business, right? And Unilever wanted to help their employees to find their purpose so that they can contribute more meaningfully to the company. The motto was that, people with purpose thrive, brands with purpose grow, and companies with purpose, they last. So the day before going to my purpose workshop, I told another Christian coworker of mine, half jokingly, oh, I don't need to go to this purpose workshop. Like, I already know what my purpose is in life. And she was like, oh, really? Like, what's your purpose? I said, well, it's to spread the love of God, to everyone and to help others to know him, right? I feel like that's like the overarching purpose, or the purpose that every Christian should have. And she's like, oh, that's awesome. You can live out your purpose at work too, You could even, start a Bible study or something like that. And, when she said that, I thought it was a great idea. But then I started to think about it. And then, it was all fun and games thinking. I got scared thinking about it. And, it's all fun and games thinking about, how you can be a missionary at work, how you can touch people's lives and bring them to Jesus. But then, at the same time, it could be very scary because it could be very awkward. There's a lot of non-believers. People might judge you, that's a very real fear. And what if it gets awkward with people and they start looking at me weird? When you're telling random people at the doors about Jesus, that's really easy because you're never going to see them again, right? There's no implication on your life necessarily. But the thing is, when you're working with people every single day and you tell them about Jesus, that's a different story. But then I got convicted that I should start the study, right? God really placed it on my heart. And I was like, oh man, now I actually have to do this. You know that feeling when conviction comes upon you, you kind of don't want to do it. It's uncomfortable. You're like, oh, but if I don't do it, then like I'm sinning because I'm like pushing away the Holy Spirit. So long story short, I put the conviction off. I was like, all right, I forgot about it. And, somehow God brought it back to my mind. He kind of reminded me about it, which, God is so good. He does that all the time. Things that we put off, convictions that we put off, things that we're, that we know that we should give up. We give it up maybe in the past and then we go back to it. God doesn't leave us alone. He wants us to be saved. So he's gently reminding us. So, a couple coworkers of mine who I knew were believers, we got together and, we planned how the study would be run, and I was in charge of leading it. And this is how the Unilever Bible Study Group was born. Now, keep in mind, I was the only Adventist at my company. Now, a week went by, and it was about time for our first study. And the day before the study, we went all around the office looking for Christian coworkers and those who we thought were spiritually open, and we invited them to our Bible study. Now, that day, I ran into a coworker of mine in the kitchen, and we had both been contractors that started at Unilever around the same time. And we had both started doing testing work in the labs. But since then, I had moved on to a full-time employee status, and I was doing more of like an engineer role, a project-based role, and he was still in the lab. Now, just to paint a picture of who he was, he had tattoos all over his arms, diamond-studded earrings, right? He was very foul-mouthed. He talked about women in very inappropriate ways, openly, and he just had a very negative, dark atmosphere around him. He would mock people often. I remember, and a lot of times that was kind of his sense of humor. So it was funny sometimes, right? But of course, when he made fun of you, it wasn't that funny. It didn't feel so good, right? So that's the kind of person he was. I remember one time I was doing a silent prayer at my desk, and he saw me, and he pointed it out in a very mocking way. He's like, "Oh." However, I had heard from a coworker that he had had a recent conversion experience, and he turned back to God after many years of living in the world. And I could definitely tell that he changed a lot from when we were both hired, because he no longer cursed, he no longer wore his earrings. He, the way he talked to people seemed a lot more genuine, and he seemed a lot more kind than he was before. He was still rough around the edges, though, but God was working on him. And I decided to invite him to the Bible study, and when I asked him, he said, "Oh, for sure, I'd love to join. That's crazy. I was actually thinking about doing something like this as well." And with the way he said it, I thought he was like being sarcastic and making fun of me, But I was like, "Are you actually serious?" And he confirmed that he was not playing around. He actually wanted to have some kind of Bible study at work. So it's amazing that God placed the burden for ministry on both of our hearts around the same time. Now, the day of the study came, and it was about close to the time that it would start. And I was pretty nervous. I hadn't really let out too many studies in the past. And on top of that, this was a corporate setting, so I was even more nervous. This is not like your Friday night Vespers. And, public speaking is not my strong suit, so I was worried that there would be awkward pauses or, I would run out of things to say. I was truly worried about that. So I got to the room 10 minutes earlier before it started, and I was praying for the Holy Spirit to guide me, to guide my words. Now, the first day, we probably had about 7 or 8 people total. And I decided to start with the Daniel chapter 2 study. Now, for those of you guys who don't know, it's a huge time prophecy that King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon had a dream about a massive statue with a head of many different, made of many different metals, and it predicted the rise and fall of kingdoms, eventually ending in, a rock coming and smashing that statue, and which signifies Jesus setting up his kingdom on earth and all the worldly state of affairs completely coming to an end. Now, as we went through the study, everyone was rapt with attention, and they were searching through the scriptures. They were so attentive, and everyone was just blown away by this study. I could tell. All these little historical facts and parallels tying to Bible prophecy, they were just amazed that a prophecy this incredible and far-reaching was in the Bible, and that God really predicted all these things. Now, these truths that we become so used to, because they barely faze us, we've almost become immune to them because we've heard it so many times. You got to remember that just because we've heard it so many times, there's a lot of people that haven't heard it, and when they hear it, they're actually amazed at these teachings. Adventist truth, biblical truth, is actually incredible, so we shouldn't sell ourselves short of these things. Now, as I finished the study, it was only supposed to be about an hour long, but most people stayed and started to share their testimonies of the amazing things God has done in their life. So it became like a testimony sharing session, and I could strongly feel the presence of God in the room at that time. And, people were praising him for his goodness. And finally, as we ended the study, I was just thanking God so much for making this first Bible study a huge success. And, what's really incredible is that even outside the study, people would be talking about spiritual things in the open office place where other people could hear, non-Christians could hear. And it seemed to kind of change the vibe of the office, right? Because now we had like a group of, Christian presence in that office. Now I want to tell you about, this was also the canvassing program, us and Doug Batchelor. Okay, that was one of our Bible studies. It wasn't the first one, but, that's one of the Bible studies that I was able to take a photo of before the pandemic. Now, I want to tell you about one of my coworkers. His name is Chris. He's the Italian guy in the middle. So when we had started at the company, I was working in the lab again. He was the lab guy. He's the one who trained me. He taught me everything I knew. And we would spend a lot of our days working very closely together, so we became very close. And we talk about, anything and everything. We joke around. We just have a good time on the job. We'd laugh a lot, but obviously we get our work done too. And, one day, maybe about a year into my time at the office, he came up to me and he said that he needed to have a talk with me. He and his girlfriend of 9 years had just broken up. And he was going through a really rough time, and he just needed a listening ear. So, I heard everything that he had to tell me. He really poured his heart out to me. And I was able to pray for him in his situation, and he was really thankful for that. And then I also gave him a Steps to Christ to help him through the tough times. And he was really appreciative. He said that he would definitely read the book. So I asked him about Steps to Christ later. So he had read through the first chapter, and then after that he lost interest. So he didn't really read through the book. But in my mind, you have like this grand picture. Oh my goodness, he's going to read through the whole Steps to Christ. It's like, oh, like God has touched my life. Like, let me be a Seventh-day Adventist. But it didn't happen like that. So I got a little discouraged, But much later, when I started the Bible study, I invited him to the study, and he joined the very first one. And it was amazing because he didn't really have too much interest in God before, but he loved the study so much that he was inviting another coworker to come, right? This Puerto Rican dude that was working in the warehouse. So it was just amazing to see God work in his heart. Now, he was Chris was a pretty regular member of the study, and he said it was his favorite meeting of the week. Actually, a lot of the people in the study, they say that this is their favorite meeting of the week. And over time, he switched to another team within our group, and unfortunately, he got very busy and he stopped joining the studies. He just got slammed with work. So it was very sad to see him go. But then like a year later, he randomly hopped onto the Bible study, video call. It's like, whoa, Chris, like we haven't seen you in a while. And, he told us that his work schedule had opened up a little bit, and he was now free to join the studies. And he said he felt like something was missing in his life, and he needed to have it back. So he's been faithfully joining the studies ever since, every single week, right? I mean, he usually would be like messaging me, like, yo, Brian, we doing the Bible study this week? Sometimes I'll forget to send out a message, but he would send the Microsoft Teams message to me. I was like, yeah, we're doing the study. So I send the message, happy Friday. This week we're studying Isaiah chapter 58, whatnot. So, and since then, I've talked to him about the importance of personal devotions, right? Not just going to Bible study once a week, but doing personal devotions. So, to help him to get in the habit of it, we even started doing morning devotions together for a period of time. And to be honest, there was a lot of times that I forgot, but he would text me and be like, yo, Brian, we're doing morning devotions? So, I could really, then I'd remember and I'd call him, Sometimes they turn out to like 30 minutes. In my mind, I was like, okay, like, I did my own personal devotions and I'd go with him, but I had to get to work, But then sometimes it would get to like 20, 30 minutes, and they were good. They were really good. And, it's incredible because I've seen his spiritual growth over the years that I've known him, and he would tell me things like, God is really doing things in my life. He randomly texted me in the morning and said recently, hey, do you have any devotions today? I wanted to see if you wanted to pray together. Another text that he sent me was, hey, bro, thank you for everything. Having God on your side is amazing, and I appreciate you for reintroducing him to me. And a lot of times when something stressful would happen in his life, or there was a testimony that he wanted to share of what God has done, he would just be like, hey, like, let's talk real quick, and he would just tell me what was going on, and we'd pray, and it would just be awesome. Now, at this point, the study has been going on for about 3 years, and I'm pretty sure none of them know that I'm Seventh-day Adventist. I've never shared with them any of the controversial studies like the Sabbath, the state of the dead, hell, Antichrist, right? I've alluded to some of these things before in the past. I've alluded to them. But the reason for me not disclosing the fact that I'm SDA or even sharing these controversial studies is because I don't know what notions people in the study may have about Adventists, right? I think Chris and Ron, they probably wouldn't care, but we have other people in the study that are like, Sunday churchgoers, and I don't know, maybe they think we're a cult. I don't know. And maybe they'll think eventually I'm going to try to get them to drink the Kool-Aid. So, they might try to write off every study that I did as, oh, that's just like Seventh-day Adventist. Oh, that's like a weird cult belief, right? They could think about these kind of things. So the thing is, it's spiritual warfare. So I didn't want them to have any preconceived notions about what I'm teaching them from the Bible. My goal is to get them all closer to Jesus, to get them closer to the real God of the Bible, a God who is a God of unconditional love. And any specific controversial studies, I would do, if the opportunity arose, I would probably do a one-on-one study with them. Because if I did a Sabbath study or a health study, for example, with the whole group and it didn't go well, maybe they might never come back, you know? So I was thinking about the longevity of the group and introducing them to the true biblical Jesus. But recently, God has convicted me to share, specific Adventist doctrines, beliefs with them. Specifically, it's all good news. It's good news about God. The gospel is good news. So I thought, well, it's been 3 years. Might as well do it now. I'm probably never going to do it if I don't do it now. So I prayed to God for wisdom, and then I did a 4-part series on the state of the dead, the rapture, millennium, and hell. It actually stretched out longer than that because some of the studies did multiple parts because they'd be asking questions and we'd be discussing all these things. And surprisingly, the studies went really well. They were engaged. They were really paying attention, giving comments on the study. I warmly invited questions and even objections and pushback, saying like, hey, it's totally okay if you guys don't agree with this. If you guys have any objections, like, please bring it up. I'd love to discuss them, right? I wanted to be very open, right? I didn't want them to feel like, very nervous about bringing up objections about these studies. So not a single objection was raised. So I think it's safe to say they probably accepted it because they're still coming back to the study, right? And I know for sure 2 of my closest coworkers definitely accepted it. I think there was a lot of warm reception to these truths. Now, once I got to the hell study, there was one guy who didn't join for any of the previous studies, and he just happened to pop in on the hell one. And I was like, oh, great. I was like, let's see how this goes. So I was trying to give some background, which builds up to the study. I didn't want to just straight up jump into it and be like, what is this heresy? So I was giving the background, and then, my coworker, Ron, he's the guy on the right, with the green shirt. And I love that guy. He speaks up and he's telling to the new joiner, he's like, yeah, death is just asleep. We don't go to heaven or hell right when we die. We're just sleeping, just like Jesus says. So I didn't even have to explain it. He is explaining the state of the dead to this new guy. And after we finished the hell study, they made some deep remarks. For example, Ron, he had said, it's so interesting because everyone grows up, programmed about this belief that hell is eternal. That's just what everyone believes, but that's actually not what the Bible is teaching. It's amazing when you actually study the Bible and see what it's saying. Now, Ron, right? He's one of my favorite guys in the office. He's always so enthusiastic when we talk about God. He's incredibly bold talking about God because he literally does not care if people hears him or not. And he's also loud. So he'll say it. Everyone's hearing this stuff. It's funny, like sometimes, we're doing like the Microsoft. Before we would meet in like a conference room, right? And we'd study, so it's like within closed doors. But then like now that we do a lot of Microsoft Teams meetings, he'll be joining in the middle of the office space and he'll be like talking about the Bible. He's got his headphones on. Everyone can hear around, and I'm just like, wow, I wish I had that boldness. Like that's the level of boldness that I aspire to. So he's been a source of encouragement for me in continuing the study as well. There was times where we only had a very small group, like just the 3 of us, me, Chris, Ron, and we were brainstorming ways to grow the group and to spread awareness of it in the company. But one day after the study, he pulls me aside. He's like, hey, let me talk to you, Brian. And he says, listen, Brian, I know the group is sometimes small and maybe it feels like you're not really making much of an impact, but just know that you've made a big impact in my life and you've helped me so much spiritually. That really hit me. I also recently decided to study the Sabbath with him one-on-one because no one else could join the Bible study that day. It ended up being a 3-hour Bible study, and not because I wanted it to be 3 hours. The conversation was going so well, and he was so into it. And honestly, like I was getting really hungry because we had the study during lunchtime, and I usually eat after. So I'm like, I kind of want this to end so I can eat lunch. But it was 3 hours. He was like so engaged. I was like, listen, if he's willing to keep going, I'm willing to starve for the sake of the gospel. So we continue doing the study, and he ends up fully accepting the Sabbath and saying how he wanted to find a church community that would keep the Sabbath. And he even expressed interest in wanting to visit our church sometime. He actually moved to Massachusetts during the pandemic, so he comes into the office every now and then because he's renting out his home in near New Haven. But he wants to come sometime, so hopefully we'll be able to have him. And before we even started the study, he was talking about how he had so much work to do over the weekend And he was going to do it Friday, Saturday, and Sunday because he had a huge meeting with senior stakeholders, right? This massive presentation that he had to give. But after the study, he was like, "Oh yeah, I know I said I had a bunch of work, but I know it ain't getting done on Saturday." And I was just amazed, And he was also putting together a Christian playlist because he felt convicted to listen to less secular music and more Christian music. And he said he was naming the playlist Sunday Vibes. But after the study, he was like, "Well, I'm going to have to change the name of the playlist to Saturday Vibes." And I was like, "Sabbath Vibes." He's like, "Yeah." So as we were wrapping up our 3-hour study, he said, "I feel like I need to pay you or something, or I need to do something for you in return because I keep getting free value from you every single week. And, I take so much of your time. I feel like I need to give something back." And I reassured him that I love doing these studies. I love sharing about God. And he didn't have to pay me any money. So I just want to share a few more, a few more brief studies. So I went to Sacramento earlier this year. I saw, Pastor Dwayne Lemon. Some of you guys may know who he is. And I told him about our Unilever Bible studies, and I asked him if he wanted to be a guest speaker for a virtual study. So he said yes, he'd be down, right? Yeah, and like Dwayne, he's like one of the famous, Adventist preachers. He, is on Audioverse and all this stuff. He said he'd give his testimony about leaving the hip hop industry because he actually used to be deeply in the hip hop industry. He was a dancer. He used to work with a bunch of big names like Brandy, like Busta Rhymes, and you guys probably have no idea who they are. What? Yeah, Kachi's like, yeah. He's like, so anyways, a lot of these big names in the industry. It wasn't like he just worked with like some small artist that has like 2,000, YouTube views. Like this guy was in it. But he was giving his testimony, which is really powerful. So this was the largest our study has ever been, right? My non-Adventist friend from a different company joined. She was a former member of our group, and she left the company. And then we had 2 Muslim colleagues join as well. We had some Adventist friends who even called in. And I even asked my line manager. I don't think he's super spiritual, but I asked him if he wanted to join, and he did. He joined. And it was awesome, and people really enjoyed the testimony. Even my Muslim colleagues were like, "Oh, that was great. That was great." They wanted to join the study sometimes, but unfortunately, we have it at a time when they're supposed to go to the mosque. So we've also even done activities together, right? Like going fishing and boating, on Chris's boat. He lives in Brantford. He owns a boat there. So, we enjoyed time in God's nature. We had some lunch together on there. And we even had a study right there on that boat, right? I don't have a picture. Yeah, like we did it felt like biblical times. We're like on a boat, fish around us, and we were studying thoughts from the Mount of Blessing. It was just incredible. There's I think a bluefish that he caught, or that might have been a sea bass. There's me, I caught one too. That's probably the biggest fish I ever caught. I never did fishing out on a boat. And yeah, that was some of us when we were there doing the study. That's a group picture that we took together. I edited that myself on Microsoft PowerPoint. We all put the same background so it looked like we were together, and we took pictures separately. Ron and Sarah on the right hand, they were in the office that day, and they got to be together during the study. But so yeah, we meet up sometimes when we can. Hopefully we'll be able to hang out a little bit more. We even have a member from the UK who joins from time to time. He was the Lean Six Sigma instructor. Genius. This guy's brilliant, right? He works with all these top companies, has all these savings programs, these process optimization programs. So this guy from the UK, he was our instructor, right? I got Lean Six Sigma certified from him. That's the guy in the upper left-hand corner. So he joins sometimes when his wife will let him, because he's in the UK. The time we do a Bible study, that's tea time for them, I guess, or like dinner time. So, he can't. But when he gets away from the wife, he joins us. So this is when we all met up together at the Cheesecake Factory, which was nice. Now, some of you guys may remember this guy, Haider. He's a coworker from Dubai. I had never met him in person. We had just kind of talked on Microsoft Teams and developed a good relationship. But I invited him to come and stay at my place or at the parsonage because he was traveling to the U.S. So he came. He hung out with us. He came to church. He heard me give a sermon at church, and he was talking about how much he appreciated it and was blessed by it. He even joined us for Thanksgiving get-together at Kachi's house. And to this day, he talks about, oh man, split-level home, so cool. Like, we never got anything like that in Dubai or the UK, because he's originally from the UK, was working in Dubai, but he's a Muslim guy. But he's like, yeah, split-level home. I don't know why split-level home is so cool, but he loves it so much. And he said that being a part of our church community was literally the best part of his trip. Because, he was doing a straight-up U.S. tour, right? He went to, like, Florida, Buffalo. I don't know why he went to Buffalo, but he went there. New York City, Chicago, Washington, D.C. And he would keep raving about how awesome his experience was with our community, like being part of a group and experiencing Thanksgiving, joining church. And he talked about even months after he came to visit. Now, I even had a chance to do a Daniel chapter 2 study with him, and he loved that as well, right? So I was able to give him, this is at Kachi's house, the split-level home. And then I gave him a great controversy in the Steps of Christ. And he was, so appreciative of it. He was like, oh yeah, I'm totally going to read this when I'm on the plane and stuff. And when I did the Daniel chapter 2 study with him, he was blown away by that. He was like, oh, I can't wait to the next study, about like the signs of the times. And he even said he wanted to join the Unilever Bible study, even after he had quit our company. He left maybe about 9 months ago. Another cool thing, he brought me a deck of gold, 24-karat gold playing cards from Dubai. Because as you guys know, Dubai, everything is made out of gold. Those guys are made of money. So anyways, he got me that. That was pretty cool. If you guys ever come to the parsonage, I can break it out and show off my gold deck of cards to you guys. Now, so we've even had a time when, we've had a Hindu coworker join before, and actually one of the interns, he was an intern at the time, one of the interns found out about the Bible study from the Hindu coworker, and then she's like, oh, you guys have a Bible study every week? She's like, I want to join. So she came to me looking to join the Bible study, and she was saying, she was a newly baptized Christian, and she kind of wanted to find a community and everything. So that was really cool. Another thing, I've given Steps to Christ to all the interns that I've worked with in the past, and even to some other coworkers, right? I just am able to work with them, build a relationship, and give that to them. Some other coworkers, this is a coworker, when she was leaving our company, I gave her one, and she Steps to Christ, and she posted it on Instagram. And then even my senior manager, right? He was doing a short-term assignment. Well, he was at our site for about 2 years. He's the Indian guy, and he's from Mumbai. And I went over to his house for dinner. He invited me. I invited him over as well, and I gave him a Steps to Christ. And as he was leaving, and he was like, "Oh, that's awesome! Like, I'm gonna have my wife read this, and I want to read this book. Like, thank you so much, Brian." It was awesome. Yeah, so these are some of the opportunities. These aren't even like half the stories. I think these are some of the highlights, but there's a lot of stuff that has happened. God has given a lot of different opportunities to witness in the workplace. Now, the thing is, the reason for me sharing all this is not to show off. Oh, look at me, like the ministry I'm doing in the office. But the point is, anybody can do this stuff. You just have to be willing. God is so good, and He wants to work through us, right? Like, imagine there's all these people at our workplace, and God is like, I want to reach them so badly, right? But like, my son, Brian Park, is so lazy, he doesn't want to do anything. He's just like so hesitant. He's so scared. He's like, oh, like, I don't know how to talk to people. I'm so scared of giving Bible studies. But God is like, I want to reach them so badly. Imagine how frustrated God must be sometimes because of our lack of willingness. The thing is, I was scared, right? I was worried. I had my doubts. I was like, oh, corporate workplace, Unilever. It's not like I'm working for Chick-fil-A or, again, like some Christian-based company. This is like a progressive liberal company. But But the thing is, put your fear aside, because if God is for us, who can be against us? We can do all things through Christ who strengthens us, right? If we ask anything according to his will, and we know that he hears us, like we will have these things that we've asked. And I think it's it's like a no-brainer that it is God's will to reach people through us, wherever we are. So, all these things are within the will of God, right? So, none of this stuff would have happened. All these incredible stories, at least I think they're incredible. None of this stuff would have happened if I was too scared and decided I wasn't good enough or qualified enough. But I'm so glad that I listened to God, because I've been able to experience God work in so many ways. And, Ephesians chapter 3, verse 20, which is our memory verse, or our scripture reading for today, it says, "Now to him who is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that we ask or think, according to the power that works in us." Remember, it's not us that's doing it. So stop focusing so much about the faulty vessel, but it's the power of God that works in us through his Holy Spirit. God is waiting to do incredible things in your life, and things that are exceedingly abundantly above all that we can even imagine. And just give him permission and ask him to fill you with the Spirit so that you can go out and reach others with power. Now, you can do this at your school, you can do this at your office, at whatever workplace, at the hospital, right? I have a friend who's doing ministry in his hospital. He's a dermatology resident right now. And he shared his testimony at one of these conferences. Literally, you don't have to work at a corporate office, right? You can work, this could be anywhere. Even if you own your own business, the clients that you work with, right? Or the suppliers that you might have. So again, God is for us, right? Nobody can be against us. And he's the one in charge. Remember that you have the living God, the King of Kings, the King of the universe, the Lord of Lords, the most powerful being in the universe that is backing you, right? So my prayer this morning, this morning still, is that you are inspired as to the possibilities, and that you're able to take a step out in faith and have courage to be a light to the dark world around you, because this world is in so much need of light. Last verse here is, "Then your light shall break forth like the morning. Your healing shall go forth speedily, and your righteousness shall go before you, and the glory of the Lord shall be your rear guard." I love the picture of this, right? When we're doing these things, when we're actually living according to what God has asked us, then our light will break forth, right? Our righteousness goes before us. And I don't know if I fully understand the last part properly, but the way I understand it is so your righteousness goes before you, light is shining, and even behind you, the glory of the Lord shall be your rear, right? Your rear guard. Even when people are looking at you at the back of your head, right? The light of God is just shining out. So, yeah, you're literally just a light. You're literally just a light. I would just like to close with a word of prayer now.